I remember when I was introducing coordination in animals, we talked about this, that all animals must be able to respond, okay, to the changes in their surrounding, both internal environment and external environment. You must be able to detect and then you respond. And so in animals, unlike plants, we say that they have two systems of coordination. They have the endocrine system and the nervous system, okay? And we have tackled the endocrine system in animals, okay? Now, today, we are going to also tackle intensively the nervous system and see what is that nervous system and how does it respond, okay? Yes. So, however, there are two different systems. They must be able to interact together. These two systems must be able to interact together to bring about the effectiveness in responding to the environment of an organism as a whole. Okay? The organism must be able to respond, and there are some stimuli that require immediate responses. Now, those ones, you will use this nervous system. But there are also other stimuli that do inquire a long-lasting response. Then you will use the endocrine system. But there are also other stimuli that inquire both immediate and long-lasting. Okay? Then that's where you will use both the nervous system and the endocrine system or the hormonal system. And we said that this hormonal system and the nervous system, they both work together and they are all integrated together. So they must have some point of connection. And we say that it is that hypothalamus which is a link. Don't say which acts as a link. It is a link between the nervous and the hormonal system. Okay? And I remember explaining it, but let me repeat it. Learning is continuous. The hypothalamus is able to control the nervous system by receiving the impulse from the sensory organs and then sending other electrical impulses to the target organs so that they can respond accordingly. And it is able to link by also linking to the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. And so when you control the pituitary gland and the pituitary gland controls the entire endocrine system, then you'll be able to control the entire system. So these two systems work in conjunction to bring about the order, the overall response that an organism is going to give towards a particular stimulus. So basically that's how it is. Okay? And my background, this is a synapse, and we are going to see. Keep this picture in mind. This one, the one I used as a background, keep it in mind. It is going to be so good. Okay? And this is a synapse. And you are going to see how it works. So, therefore, what is that nervous system? Let's get some pen here. So, it is a system of nerve cells called neurons. Okay? These nerve cells, they are called neurons. Okay? And you need to know the difference between a neuron and a nerve. So, these nerve cells called neurons and sensory organs. And you have different sensory organs, including eyes, ears, tongue, skin, and so on, that do carry out coordination by transfer of impulses throughout the body. In other words, it is a system of interconnected nerve cells. Actually, whichever part of your body must have these nerve cells. Okay? to be able to respond. So for you to be a nerve system, then you must have receptors. Okay? An efficient nervous system must have receptors. Okay? What are these receptors? The ones that are going to receive a stimulus, then transduce that stimulus into a nerve impulse, and then after send that nerve impulse via a given nerve to the central nervous system for processing. So you must have a receptor. So these detect the stimuli, e.g. sensory endings of the skin, the eye, and the ears, and so on. Actually, whichever part of your body, okay, has these receptors. Different receptors. And these receptors can be cells in an individual cell, okay, or a group of cells, an organ. For example, this eye, it is an organ that is responsible for responding, for receiving, to make you see. The ear, it is an organ. The skin is an organ. But you can also have individual cells. You can have baroreceptors, heat receptors under the skin. Those are now individual cells. Chemoreceptors in the carotid and aortic bodies. Now those are individual cells, okay, that do detect changes basing on their stimuli. Okay? Now, you must have the processing organ. Okay? The processing organ. And so in this case, the processing organ is divided into two. The central nervous system, which has both, which has the brain, okay? And this one, it receives impulses, okay? Right from all over the body, okay? And then interprets, processes the information, and then sends another impulse to the effector organ that is going to respond. So this central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So this brain, it is a dense mass of neurons. So there are these neurons that do receive impulses right from different parts of the body, respond, so they process, okay? And then after processing, they respond by receiving, sorry, by sending impulses to target organs to respond to that stimulus. So that's how the nervous system works. Then finally, you must have an effector organ. Okay? The organ that is going to carry out a response. And this effector organ can be the whole structure, the whole organ of the body. It can be a gland. After all, a gland is also an organ. Or it can be an individual cell that will be stimulated to respond. Either you respond by releasing a given secretion, okay, or depending on the stimulus, you respond accordingly. So basically, that's how it is summarized. So it is as simple as that. So you must have a sensor, a sensory organ, and this sensor is going to receive a stimulus, transduce it, and convert it into the impulse. And now this impulse into a message that can be understood by the brain. Okay? Now this stimulus will be sent to the processing unit, to the system unit. Now let's use the computer language. Maybe you can understand that better. Okay? Now this system unit, sorry, this CPU, not system unit, this CPU is going to receive, okay, and then process the information, and then forms another impulse that can now be sent to the effector organs. And the effector can be a cell, like how I've said, or group of cells, organs. And so now this effector is going to respond, okay, accordingly. So now this system, it is divided into peripheral and a central nervous system. Now the peripheral nervous system, it is a system of nerves that do transport, okay, that do transport both to and from, okay. So for this eye to communicate with this, there must be nerves, okay. There must be nerves that will transmit this information from the eye to the brain. For the brain to communicate with this, there must be nerves, okay, that will transmit this information from here to here. So basically that's a picture, and that's what we shall be talking about as far as nervous system is concerned. Is that okay? Yes. Any question for me? Today let me keep. Any question for me? No question? Today people don't want to ask. They are happy. They don't want to ask. So let's proceed. You can drop the question. I'll be always happy to receive the question. So now you cannot talk about a nervous system and you fail to talk about a neuron. Okay? Like I told you, this neuron is actually a functional unit of a nervous system. Functional unit, what do I mean? It is the actual structure that do carry out coordination. Okay? It is the one that will receive an impulse, a stimulus. It is the one that will transport an impulse to the brain. It is the one that will process that impulse, because I told you the brain is a system of neurons. It is a group of neurons that work together. And so it will also the one that will transport that impulse, okay, right from the brain to the target organ, to the effector that will respond accordingly. So therefore, these neurons, they are made up of, let me get some pen here. So they are made up of small mass of cytoplasm, okay, and a nucleus in the structure called a cell body. So you cannot compare these neurons and other cells. Actually, these are modified cells. If you attended the cell biology, I talked about the diversity of cells in our bodies. These cells are modified differently based on the function that they do perform. Okay? And one of the function is coordination. And so now these cells must therefore be adapted to perform coordination. Okay? So they are elongated, they are stretched because of their function, and with a small mass of the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is not as huge, is not as big, is not as bulky compared to these other body cells. Okay? And the nucleus is located in some structure, some modified structure of a neuron called a cell body. Okay? As we are going to see. So most of the neuron's organelles are located there in the cell body. Now why are you doing all this? Why are you Actually, this is a rhetorical question that you should think about. Why all this? By the end of this topic, you shall be knowing why all this. And I'm going to ask it at the end, okay, of the topic. At the end of, I'll ask this very question, and you should be able to answer it. So, most of the organelles are located where? In the cell body. Not in the axon, not in the dendrites, not in, but in the cell body. Okay? Think about it. Think about why. So branching are cytoplasmic filaments called dendrites. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. So this is generally one neuron from here to this is a neuron. You see how it is stretched? You see how it is elongated? Okay? So this is what we call a cell body. Okay? And this cell body contains a nucleus and most of the cell organelles. Now you can't find, okay, they might be there, but like one or two in this axon. But most of them, they are in the cell body. Then these branches, branching away from the cell body, are the dendrites. Okay? And now there are these dendrites which make terminal connections with other axons. Okay? With other neurons, not axons. So that there is that continuous flow of a nervous impulse. Okay, as you can see here. So there are these dendrites which make adjacent connections. Now if I take you to the other peak, this one, oh, there are a lot of things. But the background, my background of the first slide, you saw it was this. Then some swelling, and then another swelling. Now that swelling is a synapse, okay? And that synapse is a point of connection. If I do this, okay, and I magnify this part, I'll form what we call a synapse. And that synapse is a point of connection between two adjacent neurons. Okay? So the two neurons innervate together at a point called a synapse. They do join together at a point called a synapse. And so it is that synapse that is responsible in allowing a nervous impulse to be transmitted from this neuron to another neuron, to another neuron, to another neuron, to another neuron, until when it reaches their destiny, its destiny. Is that okay? Is that understood? Yes. So then away from the cell body, then you have the nucleus, and the nucleus performs normal activities, controlling the activities of the cell body. Then you have the axon, the whole of this from this cell body, okay, up to here. Now the whole of this is an axon. Okay. Then we have this. Now this is this swelling. Let me call it a swelling. We call it the myelin sheath. Okay, the myelin sheath. Now this one, it is just a swelling of fat deposits. There are fats which are highly deposited there. Okay, and the fats are produced by a specialized cell called a Schwann cell. It is a glial cell, of course, and you're going to see what glial cells are. And its function is to secrete the fat that will get deposited here to form what we call a myelin sheath. Okay, that's pretty good. And what is the function of that myelin sheath? Yes, to improve the speed of impulse transmission. Now the question is, how is it going to improve on the speed of impulse transmission? We are going to see. in the preceding slides. Now between the two myelin sheath, okay, sheath, you just put an S, is a node of Ranvier. Okay, node of Ranvier. Now that is that part of axon that is not covered by, that is not surrounded by the myelin sheath. Okay, we call it a node of Ranvier. So basically that's what a neuron is, and those are the main parts that I've talked about that are prominent in impulse transmission. Okay, and we shall talk about them when we are talking about how an impulse is transmitted right from the receptor organ to the brain. For the types, there are 3 types of neurons, 3, and we have the sensory neuron, the motor neuron, and the interneuron, or you can say the relay neuron or the intermediate neuron. They are all the same things. They are all the same. Now with sensory neurons, these ones, they do transport an impulse from receptor organs, okay, to the central nervous system, that is to the brain or the spinal cord. So it is as simple as that. Sensory, sense, then neuron. So these ones do transport impulses from the receptors to the CNS. Consists of a fluid-filled cytoplasm or cytoplasmic tube called an axon. Okay, we saw an axon. Then the cell body. Now this is the main point. Mark this word, underline this word. The cell body is in the middle of a short axon and a dendron. The cell body is in the middle. So that one differentiates a sensory neuron from other neuron. Sometimes surrounded by a myelin sheath or with myelin sheath to increase on the impulse transmission. So you can have a look. Okay, so this one is going to be the receptor organ. Then these are the dendrites. Okay, these ones. Now the dendrites, they will terminate into the axon with myelin sheath. Now the cell body is going to be in the middle. Okay, you should also think about why. And then finally from the cell body will be transmitted further. So you get the difference? The cell body is in the middle. Because I can give you, I can say, without using words. We use diagrams to describe the 3 types of neurons. And in brackets, I say, words are not required. Sorry. So if I set such a question, then you need to know the difference. And the difference is the cell body. Then with the interneurons or relay neurons, now these ones, they are found in the central nervous system. That is in the brain. Okay, you find it in the brain or the spinal cord, but in the central nervous system. Now these ones, they are the ones which do carry out processing of the information and then coordinating the body activities. Okay, now they carry impulses from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. Okay, and so their structure is this. So this is, you can see, this is a central body. Okay, then the rest are dendrites. This one does not have any axon. Are you seeing any axon? So that is it. It doesn't need an axon. Why? Because it is found in the brain. Its role is to process information. It is found in the central nervous system. Its role is to process the information and then send impulses to the respective organs for them to respond. So it is not involved in transport but processing. So that's why it doesn't have the axon. Then the motor neuron, this one carries impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. I hope this is just simple biology. Then they consist of short dendrites with a cell body. Are you seeing the difference? With a cell body at one end of a long axon. Sometimes it might be surrounded by myelin sheath, depending on which species, and sometimes not. So, do you see where the effector organ is? Do you see where the cell body is? Do you now notice the difference between a motor neuron and a sensory neuron? Yes. In sensory neuron, the cell body is in between. But in motor neuron, the cell body is at the other end. Okay? And then on the other end, you have there the effectors. Is that okay? Yes. Then on top of these three nerve cells, we also have the supporting cells. Now these ones, they are not involved in impulse conduction, impulse transmission, but they also do perform some important role in functioning of these nerve cells. And so that's why they are called the supporting cells. Okay? Good. So they are essential for the structure. They do maintain the structure. Actually, this one is also another virgin field. Little is known about these glial cells. Okay? But at first they were believed to have only and only structure functions that they form. They modify the structure of the nerve cells. But apparently more research is being carried out. Okay? And it has been found out that these ones do carry out different functions other than just structure functions. For example, in the CNS, you have there these glial cells called astrocytes. Okay? Now these glial cells, they don't just provide the structure functions, but also they regulate extracellular concentration of sodium ions and potassium ions, and then the neurotransmitter. And so if you are able to regulate these two, then you will be able to balance, to strike that balance. Okay? So that you can now maintain the impulse transmission. Now the glia, they are called glial cells or supporting cells. This glia is a Greek word which means support. Okay? So if you find in a book where they have written glia, or in another book they have written supporting cells, you shouldn't be confused. So because they were perceived to just provide the structural support to the nervous system, then they were named glia. But on conduction, further research which is being carried out, they have found out that they do perform more than just providing support. Okay? So if you are to observe, these are the so far known glial cells. And in the peripheral nervous system, that is in the nerves, these nerves which transmit the impulse. We have there the Schwann cells, and you heard me talking about the Schwann cells. And these ones, they do secrete fats, and the fats, they are deposited to form a structure called the myelin sheath. Okay? So, imagine if they are not there. For you may think they just carry out structure protecting the neuron. But you see, they are contributing in increasing the impulse transmission speed. So it's not just support. And you see, you have the satellite cells. These are also glial cells. You have macroglia. Now these ones, they are found in the central nervous system, in the brain and the spinal cord. You have the epidermal or ependymal cells, the oligodendrites, and the astrocytes. So these ones, yes, they are not involved in impulse transmission, but they are essential as far as impulse transmission is concerned. Okay? Yes. For example, this one, it is a scanning electromicrograph, okay, of astrocytes in the brain cells and how they are providing support, okay, in the brain cells. They are show this blue, the blue ones, they are the astrocytes, and the green ones, they are the relay neurons in the brain cells. So you have a number of these glia cells, okay, and they are the ones that do contribute. They do contribute a lot as far as impulse transmission is concerned. And to confirm that their functions, their importance range just beyond structure, it has been observed that glial cells abnormalities associated with various pathologies, including the autoimmune disorder and cancer. So in cases where your glial cells are abnormal, they are not functioning to their best, then you suffer a high chance, or you have a high chance of suffering from this autoimmune disorder, okay, and cancer. So literally that's where we are going to stop today, okay.